Good morning, people. Here is a interesting question for you. I want to see what you're thinking. As you look around and you find yourself in your day-to-day dealings with either other people over the world or the culture you live in or whatever, which of the following states of mind define you best? Would you say that you feel typically traumatized or hypnotized or radicalized? Now, I don't want to put any judgment in any of that, and it would be totally sensible to feel either traumatized or hypnotized. I'm here to help you to feel more radicalized. And hopefully, um, my message um, works, but I understand that it has massive hurdles to overcome in order to do so. I mean, we're taking on here on this silly little channel that gets a silly little number of views and has our silly little following of wonderful people, of course, but it is teeny, teeny, teensy. Um, I mean, this is a message that has always been absolutely teeny, teeny, teensy kind of thing. You'll know that you're on the right track and I'm on the right track if what I am talking about here is at once very interesting to you, but also especially irritating. it, I hope it really, really annoys you. And that's important, in fact, for reasons that we'll get into, but mostly that you hear a certain kind of truthiness, at least, in what I'm trying to communicate, but there's something inherently here that just sets you off. And I want to help you understand what it is exactly that sets you off. Because if you understand that, well, I mean, it'll clear up a lot of confusion. So let's talk about this. And when I come to this point where I'm talking about things being at once very irritating and interesting, I mean, I'm speaking from experience here. I'm a person that did not grow up thinking this way. I was very much incubated in the bosom of civilization like the rest of us, and had values rammed down my throat like the rest of us, and a way of looking at the world in a lexicon and the rest, um, that was very much and fundamentally at cross purposes with what I'm trying to communicate now. So I get it. And my path away from that was a classic alchemical process, in fact, not knowing a thing about alchemical processes when I did it, but the steps of such are exactly what one would expect. And there will come for everyone who is walking along this path the moment of the negredo, of the blackness, of the completely burnt to ashes state of depression, angst, and nihilism, where you are forced fundamentally to reject the values of everything that you thought was real and that you were taught. That this is necessary to this path, because you will find that the values of the civilization and the relationships and everything else that you had been taught to value was just a big steaming bucket of crap. And in that unbelievably black pill moments that you have to embrace fully, it's essential. It's an essential step along the path to reject all of that. Appears the opportunity for the way out only there. Because once you have rejected fundamentally the values of the death cult civilization that you have been raised in, suddenly you gain the freedom from its fetters and ideology. Once you've rejected it fully, you can start to honestly look for answers yourself. And you will find that once you've rejected everything else fully, and only once, it's quite remarkable how easy and accessible the alternative presents itself to you. So, like a simple test and a diagnostic, and when you hear the average person talking about love, does it irritate you? How about nature? Does it irritate you? How about ecology? Does it irritate you? When you hear people talking about relationships, does it irritate you? On and on and on and on and on. Okay, well, here's the thing, and this is where a lot of people, especially men, get hung up on this thing, is that there's nothing wrong with love or relationships or any of the rest of these things, but there is something fundamentally wrong about how those things are understood within our exploitive culture. And even when we talk about things such as, let's just use the big one, love, most people use the term love from an I-it exploitive perspective that is innate within our civilization. There's nothing wrong with authentic love. It's fantastic. It's a force of nature. But certainly, the way that we utilize it and go about it and think about it within our culture is toxic. It's toxic. It's necessary, again, to understand deeply, fundamentally, nihilistically, how valueless, in fact, our culture has taught us to look at these kinds of concepts, our relationships with everything that is dear. It has made them hollow, superficial, and destructive. This is why we have a problem with them. It's not that the relationships that we have couldn't be good. It's that they aren't good, and there are reasons for that, which have nothing to do with the relationships themselves. Now, here's another thing that's going to irritate you, and rightly so, because you're coming from a perspective, most likely, where this should irritate you. Okay? And you'll note that I draw heavily on a lot of ancient tradition and esoteric tradition and perhaps indigenous tradition and stuff like that, which can feel a bit out there in the fringe. Okay? And you can hear, especially, from things like Native American tradition, honoring the ancient ways and the ancestors and this and that and the other sort of thing, which can irritate you from your civilizationalist perspective. And here's why. Because you ask yourself, well, why is it that I should expect that people that 2,000 years ago should know anything more about what I'm facing today than I do? Or why is it that a bunch of people that are living in teepees in the woods know anything more about my reality than I do? That seems crazy to be honoring the ancient and all the rest of that. Sure, that's the question you would ask from the point of view of civilizationist culture. Just insert, when you hear that kind of languaging, not the ancient ways, but the eternal ways, meaning that I think a person can credibly make the case that if you are unfettered with a bunch of civilizationalist ideological nonsense and a way of looking at the world that has been conditioned by a culture built on dominance, hierarchy, and exploitation. See, I'm probably irritating you there too. Get a grip on it. Once you recognize that you're coming from that perspective and you say, well, if I were to choose against this stuff, how would I just go about it? Because when you're listening to voices that come from either antiquity or indigenous cultures, what you're actually hearing are people who don't have the burden, either because they've shrugged it off or it just never occurred to them, of trying to wrangle out an understanding of reality that was encumbered by 8,000 years of crazy dominance, hierarchy, civilizational baloney, right? If a person approaches the world honestly first person, looks around, tries to get an understanding of what relating to life and the rest is about without being handicapped with a ton of prejudices, well, what you get is what I'm talking about. It's not that they were so much the ancient ways, they were just the ways that would naturally evolve in any thoughtful person who was approaching the world in a manner that was honest, courageous, intelligent, actionable. If you did that for yourself first person, these are the conclusions that you come to. And that, of course, because the basic fundamental facts of human life have not changed, that understanding is necessarily eternal, and it will always be eternal. So it's worth understanding that this message that I'm advocating here, I mean, it's certainly not novel, nor is it unique to me. I just happen to be one of the oddball people who, in the modern age, have chosen to kind of advocate for it. No, this kind of thinking only seems fringe to us because of survivorship bias, and that individuals, voices, cultures, and such that were dominating and exploitive ran over cultures and people who did not, and their voice got amplified, and those who had a more harmonious way of relating got swept away, and their butt often genocided out of existence. The party of domination is nearing its end due to the fact that the pie has mostly been eaten, and there probably will not be enough density of energy to maintain domination much longer, although they're certainly going to try. So things are changing rapidly. But I mean, it should seem quite conspicuous that if you were to advocate at any point in time, say over the last 10,000 years, any kind of creed or philosophy or anything that was positively at its core set against the king or dominance hierarchies or the algorithm or what have you, like, well, you're playing with Firebuster. There's no surprise that this kind of thinking was relegated to the esoteric mostly because it was in fact dangerous, could get you crucified, wink wink, could get you burnt at the stake for sure, certainly can get you canceled. None of this is new. None of this is new. It's dangerous, and the reason it's dangerous is that it's life affirming. Life affirming. And there's nothing that a death seeking culture fears more than a life affirming alternative. So I would say for those, and there are more every day, who are feeling completely dispossessed, burnt out, and nihilistic with the blackest of black pill, bring it on. Don't fight it. You're only going to be able to find a way out through this, if finding ways out are of interest to you, by brutally eviscerating the values that our culture rubber stamps or the most important aspects of human relating and human existence, and to come away understanding fully that the way that we have been taught to go about interacting with other, so fundamentally I it versus I thou, is poisonous. It's only then that you can reject it, that you'll have the courage to reject it. And then, again, seek honest, intelligent, courageous, contrary explanations and strategies that then you can immediately, actionably implement. And when you're ready, you find that that stuff is very close at hand. Very, very close at hand, in fact. So I thought I'd lay that on you on this rainy, dreary, dreary morning and give you something to chew on. If I pissed you off, that's great. Have a good one.